I thought home would be a refuge, a place to lay my head, to recover not just from the surgery, but from the silence of hospital nights where monitors beeped louder than human voices. I didn't expect a red carpet, but I didn't expect a locked bedroom door either. My name was still on the brass plate outside the door, Elara's room, but it didn't matter. The handle refused to turn. I knocked once, twice. No answer. Then the door swung open and there she was. Tessa, wearing my old college hoodie like it was hers, sipping from a mug I hadn't seen since July. My mug. "Oh," she said sweetly. "We weren't expecting you until later. Surprise." Behind her, I caught sight of my bed, now covered in floral pillows, my books replaced with wedding magazines. There were no traces of me left. Before I could speak, Julian stepped around the corner, smug and sun-kissed. "It's Tessa's room now," he said like it was obvious. "You'll be more comfortable downstairs anyway. The basement's all yours." Trash bags sat by the garage door, tied tight and sagging. My belongings, years of memories, condensed into sacks as if they were leaves raked in autumn. I looked at Maggie, my mother, standing at the kitchen counter. She didn't meet my eyes. "We had to make room," she muttered. Howard, my stepfather, didn't even look up from the TV. "Breaking news," he said, gesturing vaguely. "Don't block the screen, honey." I stood there, barely breathing, stitches still fresh across my abdomen, and for a second I wasn't sure if the ache I felt was from the incision or the invisible one they just made. Julian clapped his hands. "Dinner's at 6. Don't be late." Then he turned back to Tessa, laughing as she linked arms with him. I used to believe betrayal wore fangs. Now I knew it could smile in your face while holding your old coffee cup. "You don't even live here anymore," Maggie said later, her voice flat. We were in the hallway. She smelled like laundry detergent and detachment. Julian had gone to pick up wine for dinner. Tessa was humming in the bathroom. And me? I was trying not to collapse. "I just got out of surgery," I said. "I need a bed. Privacy." "You're single. It's not like you're entertaining guests." Julian's voice came from behind me and I jumped. He always moved like that, quiet, invasive. Tessa followed him out. "You understand, right?" she said as if rehearsed. "Newlyweds need space. You're so strong, Elara. Independent. Strong." As if strength meant invisibility. I remembered lying in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, waiting for a text. Julian had sent one. Just one. "Let us know when you're out." He never came. No one asked how the recovery was going. No one offered to help with medications, meals, nothing. They were too busy discussing curtain colors and paint swatches. I was an afterthought in a house I once believed would shelter me. The basement smelled like forgotten holidays, mold, dust, a tinge of wet cardboard. I flicked the light on. It buzzed. The mattress was older than I was. I sat down slowly, pain flaring across my side. I reached into my duffel bag, pulling out my recovery journal. Pages were missing. A chill that had nothing to do with the concrete floor crept over me. I opened the manila folder I'd kept with me since surgery. Medical documents, legal memos, notes from my firm. Gone. All of it. My breathing quickened. Those papers were everything. I'd spent months building a case at work. I was already skating thin ice because of my medical leave. And now, gone. My phone buzzed. "Mr. Raymond, saw your brother burning papers in the backyard last night. Just thought you should know." I sat frozen. The burn wasn't just in my stomach now. It was everywhere, radiating outward. You shouldn't accuse your brother like that, Maggie said the next morning, folding towels at the kitchen table. I didn't accuse. I asked, I replied, barely above a whisper. Where's my folder? We're a family, Alara, she said sharply, looking past me. Let's not make this into something ugly. Howard sipped coffee behind her, flipping through channels. Nothing. Julian walked in mid-laugh, phone to his ear, making brunch plans. Not a care in the world. At dinner, he passed the mashed potatoes like it was Thanksgiving and said, You look pale. Are you eating enough down there? Tessa giggled. We're redoing the curtains. I think your old ones were too gloomy. The walls didn't just echo anymore. They mocked. I watched them eat. I watched Maggie pretend nothing had happened. I watched Howard pretend I wasn't there. And I understood. They weren't just making space. They were making me disappear. But I wouldn't vanish. I wouldn't fade. I had survived surgery. I'd survived this too. Just not quietly. 3 weeks after the surgery, I had learned that survival wasn't about breathing. It was about outthinking those who wanted you silenced. And my brother was no fool. That made him dangerous. But I wasn't naive anymore. I was calculating. And I had just installed a small black eye behind a stack of paint cans in the garage. A camera hidden inside an old motion light. No one ever looked twice at broken fixtures in that house. That was their mistake. A week of footage passed before I caught them. Tessa's voice floated from the laptop speaker like sugar-coated acid. She still thinks this is admissible. She laughed, waving one of my legal briefs like it was a napkin. Grant stood beside her, silent but scanning each folder with that detached focus he reserved for things he planned to destroy. They were going through my files I'd fought for with my blood and breath. When the screen froze on Tessa tossing one document into her purse, I knew which one it was. My evidentiary notes for the firm's civil rights suit. Without them, I was a liability. Replaceable. I paused the frame, took a screenshot, and emailed it straight to Lydia. The subject line read, Premeditated tampering suspected. Backups initiated. I started recording everything. Every dinner, every hallway conversation. I wore a mic under my shirt and set voice memos on loop. They wanted war. I had studied the art of quiet battles in courtrooms. I could dismantle a lie with one sentence. This was personal, but I'd fight it like a case. The trust account was my next stop. Technically, it was still under both my name and my mother's. It was tied to my insurance policy from the firm, a detail I'd almost forgotten. But there it was, a transfer of $18,000 labeled Home Care Services, Margaret Quinn. I stared at it like it was a betrayal in bold font. Clicking deeper, I traced the request back to an IP that wasn't mine. I confronted Maggie in the kitchen. I didn't approve this, I said, sliding my phone across the table. You signed off on this? She wrung her hands. Grant said he was taking care of everything. You were recovering. Fragile. The word hit like a slap. Fragile. That's what they always called women right before they erased them. I logged into the court database, searching public filings. And there it was, power of attorney, Alara Quinn to Grant Quinn. My signature stared back at me, steady and elegant. The date? The exact day I was under anesthesia. I sent it to Lydia with one line. He forged me. Her reply came quickly. This could escalate to criminal fraud. Keep collecting. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just sat down and opened a new document. Timeline of manipulation. Maggie pretended not to see the rage building behind my silence, but I wanted her to know. So I started testing her. Did you know he used my name without permission? I asked while drying dishes, eyes fixed on her reflection in the window. Her answer was soft. Let's not stir up trouble, Alara. We just want peace in this house. Peace, the great American currency, traded for justice more often than anyone cared to admit. Later that night, I overheard her talking to Tessa. I wasn't even trying. Their voices carried through the floor vent above the basement. Let him handle it, Maggie whispered. She'll calm down eventually. That's when it clicked. She had always known. She wasn't a victim of his schemes. She was a willing accessory. A memory resurfaced. I was 6. Grant had snapped the head off my favorite doll. When I cried, he blamed me. Maggie looked at the mess, then at me and said, "You need to stop being dramatic." I hadn't thought of that day in years, but suddenly the pattern was clear. Maggie didn't like conflict. She liked obedience. She'd sold me out for silence since I was old enough to tie my own shoes. At work, the knives came out next. I was summoned to a disciplinary meeting. They said I'd mishandled a brief. It had been submitted with redactions removed, client info exposed. My credentials were flagged. My IP. Only I hadn't submitted it. Tessa once interned at my firm. She still had remote access privileges from a client folder we'd worked on together. That access should have been revoked months ago, but someone forgot. Or maybe someone didn't forget at all. Lydia sat beside me in the meeting, poised and lethal. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out the facts. Methodical. Controlled. Then I handed over my own forensic report. It took them by surprise, especially the screenshot from my garage camera and the date-stamped access logs. "We'll need to investigate further," the chair said. "You do that," I replied, standing tall. "In the meantime, I'll be rewriting my story." I went home, looked in the mirror. This wasn't the face of someone who got erased. This was a woman preparing to litigate her life back. "You don't destroy me," I told my reflection, voice low and clear. "You define my new warpath." The day of the hearing wasn't on any public calendar. It was ours, a performance designed with surgical precision. Lydia called it strategic theater. I called it justice with stage lighting. We rented a small mediation center under a neutral listing. Cameras were hidden, microphones disguised as pens. Grant arrived in his tailored arrogance, holding a latte and wearing that smug calm of a man who thought the world bent for him. "Alara," he greeted me, as if we were simply siblings meeting for brunch. I didn't respond. Lydia motioned him to sit and pushed a stack of papers across the table. "A property settlement proposal," she said smoothly. "You'll want to sign before the new fiscal quarter. It benefits everyone." He didn't read. He never did. He just smirked, signed, and leaned back. "So this means we can move past the drama." Lydia clicked her laptop. A red light blinked. On the screen behind him, his signature appeared under the live title, "Admission of Misrepresentation and Financial Tampering, Quinn Family Trust." His head snapped up. "What the hell is this?" Maggie burst into the room, breathless. "Grant, what did you do? It's online." She didn't realize the live stream had already been seen by the firm's compliance board, a few legal reporters, and by Lydia's quiet brilliance, 2 county prosecutors. Grant slammed the table. "You set me up." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Grant, you set yourself up. You stole my space, my dignity, and my silence. I'm just returning the paperwork." For a brief moment, he looked small, like a man finally seeing himself through someone else's lens. The clip ended. Lydia shut the laptop. The evidence was already in motion. "Game over," she whispered. Later that evening, the Quinn house was a stage again, but this time the cast had changed. Howard showed up unannounced, an old man in a gray coat, holding a weathered envelope. Adele stood beside him, her eyes steady. "This should have been given to you years ago," he said quietly. He handed me a notarized document, dated 1999. "It names you sole heir to this property. I signed it before your mother, and I separated." Grant's face drained of color. "That's impossible," he barked. "I filed for title control last month." Adele stepped forward. "And I witnessed the original signature," she said calmly. "This is legitimate, Grant. Your father insured it." Tessa, standing in the doorway, didn't defend him. She just stepped back, phone in hand, recording. The same woman who'd laughed over my files now filmed the downfall of her husband. Irony was a loyal friend when justice arrived late. Howard didn't look at anyone else, only me. "You probably don't remember," he said, voice rough. "You were 8. Grant broke your violin. You thought I didn't notice. I wanted to make sure you had something in this world that was yours." I didn't cry. Not anymore. Tears were for wounds. This was healing. I nodded slowly. "I accept the key to my own survival." Adele squeezed my shoulder. For the first time in decades, I felt seen. Not pitted, not managed. Seen. That night, while the house sat under its new silence, my phone buzzed. A message from Tessa. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." Attached was an audio file. I pressed play. Grant's voice filled the room, raw and furious. "If she doesn't drop the charges, I'll make sure she can't walk into a courtroom again. I mean it." Every syllable dripped with the poison he'd hidden behind charm. I forwarded it to Lydia without hesitation. "Within hours," she replied, filed and expedited. "Expect movement tonight." The sirens came before dawn. I watched from the porch as deputies cuffed my brother in his driveway, lights flashing red and white against the house he once claimed was his. Maggie sobbed from the doorway. "Please, Alara, don't let them do this to him." I turned to her, steady. "I'm not doing anything, Mother. The law is." When they drove him away, neighbors peeked from curtains. Somewhere, a local reporter was already writing headlines. "Prominent Ohio accountant arrested for fraud and threats." I didn't smile, but I exhaled. Weeks later, my room was mine again. New paint, new air. The old walls still hummed with memories, but they were quiet now, like ghosts that finally knew their place. A message pinged on my work phone. "You gave me courage to speak up too," wrote a young paralegal for my firm. "Thank you." I sat on the bed that once felt like exile and now felt like victory. Later that afternoon, I met Adele at a cafe downtown. We didn't talk about revenge. We talked about boundaries, about rebuilding what's broken without needing permission. "I didn't just take my life back," I told her, stirring my coffee. "I redesigned the architecture of who I am." She smiled. "And it's beautiful, kid." That night, as I unpacked the last box, I noticed a white envelope on my dresser. No return address. Inside was a photo. My mother sitting with an unfamiliar man in a suit. On the back, a note. No name, just words in neat handwriting. She's making her own arrangements. The room suddenly felt smaller. Some ghosts, I realized, don't haunt houses. They hire lawyers.